Welcome to Face the Jury, a podcast dedicated to confronting the issues of medical malpractice in America, what it is, how to spot it, and how to protect you and your family from medical negligence. I'm your host, Lloyd Bell, the host of Face the Jury, and it is my pleasure today to welcome two of my favorite clients of all time, Janet and Stefan Lane. Stefan, Janet, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Um, I mentioned that you're two of my favorite clients, and I mean that. We were together for a number of years and recently resolved your lawsuit that you had against one of the largest healthcare organizations in the state of Georgia. And we're going to talk about your experience today, a little bit about the case. We'll talk about your experience as clients, how the legal process sort of unfolded. But before I do that, I'd like you just each to tell us a little bit about yourselves, where you're from, a little bit about your story. So, Stefan, why don't you kick us off?
All right. I'm now 73 years of age. I started out in the city of New York. I was born in the Bronx. Went to high school in Brooklyn. I immigrated to Georgia in '78, and I've been here long enough to feel that I never lived anywhere else. Um, I spent a lot of years, or many years, as a construction guy doing commercial renovations and building, and also was a school teacher where I taught vocational education. And I was the last construction trades teacher in Fulton County schools. Um, all during my life, from age 14, I started studying the piano and ended up gravitating towards the bass. And I played bass up until the night that I had the stroke.
And
So,
yeah, we'll talk about the stroke in just a little bit. And I understand you played in a band.
well, I actually played in several. I was one of the few bassists that actually read music. So I was able to sit in many, many different types of settings, whereas I played with a community orchestra for 10 years. I played with a jazz group for 9 years. I played with rock bands all through the time I was here in Georgia.
Yeah,
And I was a pretty versatile player. I could play what I heard, if that makes any sense to
yeah,
anybody.
yeah. Real a talent I do not have, and I have a lot of admiration for you.
Oh, thank you.
Let me switch over to your bride here, Janet. Introduce yourself. Tell us about a little bit about your background.
Hi, I'm Janet Lane. I also moved to Georgia from New Jersey in '76 and for a teaching job. And I taught math and language arts a little bit, but mostly math in Clayton County and then in Gwinnett County and finally in Fulton County. I retired in 2016 with 40 years
Oh,
um,
congratulations.
in from Fulton County. I retired at, well, 2016 was about 35 years. And then I thought I couldn't imagine myself retired. So worked part time for an additional 5 years. And then finally decided that it was time for me to let that part of my life go and go on to other things.
Yeah.
So worked in public education and then was a graduation coach and student support teacher and an advocate for students.
Well,
She's still
and
tutoring.
say again, Stefan.
She's still tutoring.
I actually have a young lady that I worked with when I was working part time that will call me. She's in high school now, and ask me to help her with her math. So I am there for her, and it's my pleasure to to help somebody who really wants to try.
Well, thank you for sharing that. You never fully retire in this business if you love what you do.
Mhm.
Well, we met as this happens in my profession. We met under very unfortunate circumstances. Stefan had had experienced a stroke and went to Emory Hospital for treatment, and then had a series of very unfortunate, mismanaged care, in our view, that uh, made something that could have been addressed and reversed, and could have had a much more favorable outcome, turned into something catastrophic. And what I'd like you to do, Stefan, is just to tell us your story of what happened the night that you experienced a stroke.
Well, I drove home from a concert that we played with Linear Jazz. It was an 18-piece stage band. Came home and was made it. Janet had made salad, and I was having salad for dinner, and my left arm didn't respond to my command to place the fork in my mouth, being left-handed. And I thought that was really odd. So Janet immediately put me in the car and off to the closest hospital with the biggest reputation for being good, doing good things. Went to Emory Johns Creek, and I walked in, and they checked me out and put me in one of the observation rooms in the emergency. And I was there for 24 hours, I believe. So all the while, I just felt like I was, put in the closet, and you wait here. And I remember walking back and forth to the bathroom, holding my gown together, and because I couldn't even get a urinal from those guys. They put. So I went. I remember doing that 3 times, and the story unfolded from there. Brought upstairs, and remember my blood pressure skyrocketing, and Janet calling in the nurse because she heard the machine go off. Excuse me. And they gave me, from what I recall, was a IV of what was that, hydralazine or something to immediately lower my blood pressure, which I learned later was probably a mistake, because there's always that possibility with a higher blood pressure will push a clot through. But not being a doctor myself, that's my understanding of it.
Well, and you had a type of stroke. They're different types, but the type you had is known as a clot stroke, or an ischemic stroke, where a clot blocks up one of the arteries in your brain. And what was interesting about your case is that when you showed up at the hospital, you had stroke-like symptoms, but then they resolved and they went away for a period of time. And in medicine, that's called a transient ischemic attack, or a TIA. And they did the right thing by admitting you for observation. But then you had another episode under observation with another series of stroke symptoms, and then those resolved. And then you had yet another series of symptoms, and then that was the time where a neurologist came to see you, but then didn't call a stroke alert and didn't take actions to address the clot. Janet, can you tell us your memory of that?
So, as Stefan said, he had come home from a concert, and I was here. He had the salad, and when he told me he couldn't pick his arm up off the table, I said, "We need to go to the hospital right now." And he said, "Take my blood pressure first." And I said, "No, I'm not taking your blood pressure." I do remember from years of being in public education that the school nurse would always come in and talk about the signs and symptoms of stroke, which, if I can just veer a little bit, right now, the acronym is B FAST. It used to be just FAST, but the B stands for balance. So if you're having any balance issues, and of course, there's a lot related to that, but it's balance. fast is face. So the face would droop. It stands for arms. You can't pick your arms up off the table or can't pick your arms up. S is speech. Your speech is impaired. You may hear the person speaking gibberish. And T stands for time. So you have a certain window of time to get that person to the hospital.
And did you know that? Did you know what BFAST stood for and understand these symptoms at the time?
Yes, so I did know that it was back in 2017, I believe the acronym was just FAST. So I did know that not picking his arm up was a sign, and that we needed that a stroke might be pending. Stefan had symptoms also, had a history of high blood pressure. So it was not uncommon for us to get to an emergency room and check out blood pressure, and he had a number of stents put in, but was always released the next day or a couple days. So as Stefan said, I did not put him in the car. He actually walked himself into the car, buckled himself up. Just want to make sure that at that time, as you said, everything resolved. As I was driving, it was December 2017. It was late at night in the suburbs, really no traffic. And I was just really zooming down the street to get to the hospital. And Stefan then again said to me, my face is tingling. And I just said, hold on, we're going to get there. So I pulled up to the emergency room door. He got out and he walked in. I grabbed the closest parking spot, went in. He was standing up at the counter, and I just kind of said, this is what's going on. And they pretty much took Stefan right away. And as you had said, there was some observation. It was late at night. It was like I think I left the hospital around 1 a.m. that night. I was in touch with Stefan on the phone all that next day, back and forth. We had some things going on that afternoon. I had things going on that afternoon. And so trying to, multitask and be in two places, but I was constantly in communication with Stefan. I got to the hospital that night around 6:30, and he had been moved from the observation in the emergency room up to a room upstairs. We had some friends that came to visit us or visit him, and everything seemed to be going well. And it was probably about 9 o'clock that things started to take a turn for the worse. And
Tell us what happened.
so Stefan was hooked up to machines, and he first had complained about a very severe headache, and he doesn't normally get headaches. So they did come in and give him something for his headache, and the blood pressure went up, and they came, and Stefan's room was right across from the nurse's station. So even though the nurse's station can hear the monitor, I opened up the door and said, hey, the machine's going off. And I think it happened really twice. The second time that's really sticks in my mind from 5.5 years ago is his blood pressure had gone up to well over 200. I think it was 212 over 140 or something really
3.74
or really extreme. And so the nurse called the doctor who was in the hospitalist that was in the emergency room that night that actually had admitted Stefan, so he knew him. And the two of them seemed to be talking about what was going on. And then the neurologist did come in. The neurologist did do an assessment of Stefan. One of the things that he did was he asked Stefan to pick his arm up over his head, and then he dropped the arm and let it go. And supposedly there is some sort of test that if Stefan moved his head, it showed that he didn't have a stroke, or there's probably somebody with more medical knowledge than me can kind of address what that's about. He did a lot of prompting, excuse me, with, can you feel this? Can you feel this? Touching Stefan. Stefan actually never lost sensation. So he could feel, but he could not move his left side. And Stefan began to sweat profusely from his head. And so the neurologist said, I feel very confident that Stefan did not have a stroke, and he needs a good psychiatrist. He is having a conversion disorder.
A
So,
psychiatrist.
yes, he needs a good psychiatrist.
That
And
this was
he,
all in Stefan's head, and that he was imagining or just sort of conjuring these ailments, and
right,
that's what the doctor thought was going on.
right, that
Yeah.
all the symptoms
A psychosis.
of everything that was going on was all made up.
What was your
Um,
reaction when they asked you, when they suggested he just needs a psychiatrist?
um, Unfortunately, my reaction was really first, why are you doing this? What's going on? I was dumbfounded. I couldn't understand what was going on. And my first reaction was like, what? Just really why? I really, the doctor and the other doctor, the hospitalist and the nurse were in the room at that same time, and nobody spoke up. And, I guess I have to say, maybe I was a little intimidated by the neurologist being like, you're a neurologist, you're supposed to know what's going on. But I would just on a side note, I would just say, if anybody's listening to this and you feel that this is something's not right, speak up. Speak up and just say, hey, he was fine, and we were having a great time with our friends, and our son called and everything was fine. This is just happening now. And the bottom line is, Stefan had had a history of high blood pressure, and he was in that age range. So I went home. They took him out. They did some testing on him. They took Stefan out of the room. It was about, by that time, 11:30 at night. And I just sat down and in the room, in the chair, and looked at the empty space in the room where the bed was. And I just really didn't know what to think. We have a son that's a psychiatrist. And so, being the mom that I am, I'm not calling Zachary right now. I'm not going to call him. It's too late. He's probably sleeping. So the next morning I did call, and I said, told him what's going on. And my son said, conversion disorder is the last thing they should be thinking about. They should be ruling out all of the other, things. And so,
Like stroke.
stroke, yes,
Sure. Yeah.
they should
Yeah.
be ruling out stroke. And so, that Saturday afternoon, that next day that all happened Friday night. Saturday, things didn't get any better. I actually had gone down to the gift shop and bought some chocolate candy and stood by the left side of Stefan's bed and tried to see if he was left-handed, if Stefan would take the chocolate candy with his left hand to see. I was trying to do my own little evaluation, and he didn't. And things were not getting any better. And so I really didn't know what to think. It was actually not until Sunday. They did some additional testing on Sunday morning now, when the stroke happened Friday night. And then the hospitalist said, I would want to talk to you, and confirm that it was a stroke. And that,
So it took 2 days from the time that he was having these stroke symptoms before you received the definitive diagnosis that yes, in fact, this was a stroke. Is that
yes,
right?
that
And so
is,
by then it's too late.
that's
Uh,
correct.
I mean, you
Because
both, yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to talk about TPA, which, why don't you, I'm going to just say,
Let me add a couple of things here.
Yeah, go ahead, jump in there,
When,
Stefan.
excuse me. When he said, when when the doctor said that I had needed a psychiatrist, I was actually relieved and inwardly happy for about 15 to 30 seconds because I figured I'll deal with crazy. I'll just get another different colored pill and some talk therapy and we'll work through this. But I started to get very angry. And at that point, I never lost my ability to think. It may have been impaired, it's equivalent. What I was experiencing was the equivalent of going a couple of rounds with a boxer, being hit in the head. But I was struck literally with how this doctor was allowed to walk into the room, and it was almost as though the Messiah had arrived, and everybody in the room just sat there in reverence of this man. No feedback, no consultation, nothing. And it just to me, it just flew in the face of, of logic.
Well, to that point quickly about, that sort of deference that healthcare professionals, nurses, what they call mid-levels, PAs, physicians assistants, that when you have that type of hierarchy, you can have real problems because people are afraid of speaking up. And this actually impacted your case because I know you both know this, but for our listeners, if a person is having a stroke, that is a time-sensitive emergency. And if you get somebody to the hospital quickly, the clock is ticking for whether that person can be effectively treated. And the standard of care now is that a patient who is having a stroke, a clot stroke, should receive TPA clot buster, it's called. It's a chemical that can dissolve clots within 4.5 hours from the time the patient is last known to be well or to be normal. And then there are other treatments that go even beyond the 4.5 hours, called thrombectomy, where they can possibly put in a little, like a rotor-rooter device into the vessel in the brain and pull the clot out and restore blood flow. But that window closes, and once that window closes, these treatments are no longer available. So time is of the essence. And one of the things that was so, frankly, tragic about the care you received was that your very diligent wife, who was alert and engaged and took you seriously, got you to the hospital very quickly. I mean, I think you were in the hospital within a very brief period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But then once your stroke signs and symptoms went away, then the clock resets. So then when your symptoms came back, that starts the clock again for another 4.5 hours TPA, up to 8 to 12 hours for thrombectomy. And then when your symptoms resolved and came back the third time, then the clock reset. But the part that was so disturbing for me in this case was that the neurologist could have looked at the record and seen that you had been examined by a nurse just a few hours earlier. And that examination showed that you were normal, you're neurologically normal. And that should have reset the clock. But the neurologist testified, well, I don't listen to nurses when they do evaluations. They don't know as much as I know. So I would not consider a nurse working in a neurological wing of the hospital. He's saying, I wouldn't listen to a nurse in terms of evaluating last known well. And because of that, frankly, that arrogance, you were denied potential treatments that would have brought you back to normal and avoided so much of what you deal with on a day-to-day basis. So that was the part that impacted me in terms of how your course of care went. Would you mind talking to us, Stefan and Janet, um, about your condition now? I mean, what has your stroke kind of left you with since you've been on this kind of path of recovery? Or 5 year, 4 years now, 5 years,
5.5 years ago.
5.5 years. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I have what's referred to as hemiparesis, which my entire left side of my body is very, very weak. I am able to get up out of my wheelchair and walk to the bathroom. Um, and I can walk a certain small amount of distances in a belabored fashion. I use a what is that called?
Hemi
A
walker.
hemi walker, because I
Mhm.
can't use a regular walker because my left arm is useless.
Mhm.
Um, Being left-handed, I can no longer type, except on a telephone, my iPhone. Um, I haven't played in my instrument in 5.5 years. Um,
I'm not a musician, but I've known enough musicians in my life to it's sort of or come close to appreciating what a loss that is. And could you share with us a little bit about what does it mean to be a lifelong musician, and then one day no longer be able to play again?
well, when when a person begins to study music at an early age, um, you learn to express yourself emotionally through the instrument, which in some ways is not healthy because it interferes with interpersonal relationships, because you dedicate how you feel and express through the instrument. So when all through the years, it was one of my shields for dealing with people. I would go and haul myself up and play. Take away take away that layer that was so integral to my emotions, expressive emotions. I I was left emotionally paralyzed, so to speak,
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
it it comes out as level of frustration that's hard to describe.
yeah.
Um, I can't even I can't use a knife and a fork. Janet has to cut my food. And
Yeah.
And one thing about the music is, I loved that our life that Stefan would go like 2 or 3 times a week to the open mic jam nights where he would be able to go play someplace and play. And but we, came home and we would go out Saturday night, we'd go out Friday night. It was we were together, but we still had our separate interests. And he was
Yeah.
independent and able to get around. And up even that night when he had the concert. Unfortunately, I didn't go. I had something else going on that night, but Stefan was very involved with music. And
Yeah.
that has been really a great loss. And at one point, he had said to me we had a room where all the bass guitars were hanging on the wall. And he said to me, you know, it's when I look at them, it's like looking at an old girlfriend. I'm like, we need to get those out of the room, and I don't want to see them anymore. So I do think that that was a very big loss emotionally for him.
Well, let me ask y'all, at what point did you suspect that there may have been medical malpractice or medical negligence involved? And talk to us about how you came to believe that there may have been negligence and how you got started on the path of a medical malpractice lawsuit.
Well, as I had said, that next day, Saturday morning, when I called our son, who is a doctor, and I told him what happened, and he said to me, um, that the conversion disorder is the last thing, and they should be ruling out the stroke. And as things progressed, the neurologist actually called me a few nights later. Let me back up. I did speak to the chief of staff, the medical chief of staff, who actually said to me privately that they're very sorry, that they clearly made a mistake, and this would not happen. And as I understand that kind of admission is not admissible. But so I had that. I had my son saying to me, that doesn't sound right. And what he had said to me is, don't do anything while Dad is in the hospital. Just wait. And when things are, when he's out of there, and it was going medical malpractice and seeing an attorney was really not primary on my mind. Really trying to get Stefan up and healed and thinking that he would be able to regain. We were going to work really hard. We've had friends that had strokes, just trying that this would not end up like this. So that was really never my primary goal. But when Stefan first went from the hospital after a week at Emory, went to acute care for 3 weeks, and then went to subacute rehab for another 9 weeks. While he was in the subacute, that's when I decided, you know what, let me go ahead and get the medical records. And then I got the medical records, and that started the process of, hey, is this a case?